Hello. Welcome to my Marine Conservation Project presentation. After much thought, I eventually chose to focus on manatees, and more specifically the North American manatee and its subspecies, the Florida manatee and the Caribbean manatee. Something kind of cool is on screen now is the picture. I actually took this photo with a GoPro Hero 4 camera while I was on an elementary school field trip, I believe 5th grade. I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool to include. I thought it was the coolest thing at the time. But to get started, what exactly is a manatee? Okay, so what is a manatee? Well, a manatee is a large marine mammal that belongs to the order Sirenia. And the order Sirenia contains the three extant species of manatee, which are the West Indian or North American manatee, the Amazonian manatee, and the African manatee. Finally, it also contains dugongs, which split from the modern manatee lineage around 35 million years ago and inhabit many coastal areas in Asia. Something kind of interesting that I found while researching this is the name of the order Sirenia is derived from the ancient Greek siren, spelled just like siren in English. I guess it's probably a transliteration, but which referred to a mythological woman whose singing lured ships and its crew to rocky shores where they would eventually crash. I thought it was funny because it kind of creates a connotation that these animals that are colloquially called sea cows are somehow alluring. But, anyways, let's move on to their respective biologies and characteristics. Okay, so manatees, and including the other extant species of the order Sirenia, so including dugongs, are mammals just like humans, just like us, which brings along with it the use of lungs and therefore the requirement to surface for breathing, meaning they don't have gills, they need to surface every 20 minutes or so at least to breathe. They have evolved to allow themselves to stay underwater for up to 20 minutes, but this is only possible when they're either sleeping or in a state of deep rest. While they are active and eating, which we will talk about, they do a lot of, they must surface for air every 3 to 5 minutes. Another notable characteristic of manatees and other modern sirenians is their lack of a seventh cervical vertebra. So almost every modern mammal, almost the vast majority of mammals, have seven cervical vertebrae. So with only six, this leaves the manatees without the ability to turn their necks from left to right, meaning that if a manatee sees a plant that it would like to devour on or about 90 degrees to its left, it would need to use its flippers and turn its entire body 90 degrees to the left in order to face the plant so then it could look at it and eat it, etc. Also, despite their incredible size, manatees are docile and herbivorous. They have adapted continuously growing teeth. So, their teeth are subject to much wear and tear because their teeth are a grinding motion. So they rub against each other all the time, and they essentially wear their own teeth down while they eat because the teeth rub against each other and destroy themselves, or the food is hard, or maybe they bite a rock and it chips their teeth. So they have continuously growing teeth, meaning their teeth regenerate their entire life. And this grinding motion that they use, and they only have the grinding type of teeth. They don't have the pointy carnivorous teeth. It's better suited for the plant matter they consume. So it's easier for them to grab the food and consume it. Also, the final thing on this slide that is notable is that they have adapted large prehensile lips. So prehensile meaning they can essentially grab and manipulate things with their mouth, with their lips, so they can sort through and grab what they want. So if they want that limb or a different plant or whatever they want, they can grab it with their lips. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. The life cycle of manatees. Manatees in the wild can have a possible lifespan of over 50 or 60 years. However, due to their extreme vulnerabilities to human activities, fast tides, and especially the destruction of their habitat by humans and other factors, a fourth that make it to adulthood are expected to live 20 years. So adulthood is generally around 5 years. So only 25% of 5-year-old manatees are expected to make it to their 20s. Males mature or sexually mature faster than females do by about 2 years. So males mature sexually between the ages of 3 and 5, while females are between 5 and 7. Males are notably not involved in the raising of the young and quickly leave the cow once the mating season has concluded. This cow will carry the singular calf. They can only have one. They usually only have one calf at a time. She will carry the singular calf for just over a year, about 13 months, and she will care for her young for as long as 2 years postpartum. Due to their incredible size and caloric necessity, they can consume around 5 to 10 to 15% of their weight daily. Multiple sources I found for this give different numbers, but it's usually between 5 to 15, 5 to 10% of their body weight they eat per day in weight. And they weigh on average between 750 and 1,250 pounds. So that is an extreme amount of food to consume in a singular day, meaning they must constantly be eating. As I mentioned previously, they must surface to breathe to respirate every 20 minutes, and they manage to sleep 10 to 12 hours per day underwater. And they do this by sleeping in 15 to 20 minute segments and then surfacing for air right afterwards, like taking a little breath gap in between sleeping sessions. And on the left is a super cute picture of a cow and her calf. Notice the algae growing on the adult's back. They have been found not to dislike the algae, as it may have some effects with blocking the sun and keeping them cool, but they need a warm environment. So I don't know, but that's what I read about that. Let's move on to the next slide. Of North American manatee. But before we get right into their exact habitat and range, I want to show you this picture on the right, which is a picture of the Crystal River in Florida. So the manatee picture that you saw on the first slide, that's mine, that I took, was at the mouth of this river, kind of in like a little bay estuary kind of area, like where there was docks and stuff. But I also got to swim further upstream in this river, and it is extremely beautiful. So I would 100% recommend going if you haven't and can go. It is a truly remarkable place. But let's move on to the habitat and range of North American manatees. So, the West Indian or North American manatee lives in coastal, fresh, or salt waters that are consistently warm. So, but however, they do venture out of the normal range in the summer when water temperature rises above normal, and they can get as far north as the Delaware, around Delaware and the Delaware Bay, or as far west in the Gulf of Mexico to the coasts of Texas. But when winter inevitably returns, the manatees will retreat back to their warm coastal waters of Florida, Cuba, off the coast of Dominican Republic, Mexico, and throughout Central America. In Florida, they will also retreat to they're called warm water refuges. So these can be like man-made sources of warm water in an otherwise cold location. So it could be like a power plant runoff, power plant waste that is hot, or other factory runoff or factory water waste that is warm, that warms the environment. But let's talk about how manatees are doing nowadays. That has had the most research and studies conducted upon it is definitely the Florida manatee. So it is difficult to accurately determine their population, but when the aerial slash flight studies began in the early 1990s, they estimated the population of Florida manatee at just over 1,000, and they classified it as endangered. They had classified it before that as endangered. I believe in the 70s, 1973 it was classified as endangered, but they decided to leave it as endangered when they got those numbers. The state of Florida had actually banned the hunting of manatees since around the turn of the 20th century, so around 1900. And in 1970, they established the Florida Manatee Program, which maps, monitors, and restores necessary manatee habitats. And they now post educational signage and warning signs near water accesses to discourage um, bad human activity, which could potentially harm the manatees. They also have numerous zones. I believe they're called manatee zones in Florida. So it's areas where boating traffic must slow down considerably, must take further precautions to avoid any possible collision with the manatees there. They also conduct research into new ideas, new conservational ideas such as aquaforming or building or further constructing other underwater habitat in artificial ways rather than natural. In May 2017, Florida manatees had reached a population of over 8,000, and it was then decided that they should be reclassified into vulnerable instead of endangered. However, I will show you a chart soon that showed that soon after this, the death rates rose considerably. Um, it's not sure if this was a direct correlation or just bad luck, but yeah. It's not just the U.S. that contributes to the conservation. Many other nations, such as the Dominican Republic with their Estero Hondo marine mammal sanctuary, which protects the Caribbean subspecies of North American manatees, Mexico, Cuba, and plenty other states, plenty other countries have their own conservation methods and systems. The history of manatees and the Sirenian order, the order Sirenian. So 60 million years ago, what would eventually become the Sirenians, manatees slash dugongs, departed from their last common ancestor with elephants. So yes, some of the closest living relatives of manatees are in fact elephants, and within that, that also includes woolly mammoths and the such. Manatees and elephants, along with many other species, including woolly mammoths, belong to the clade Tethera. I am not pronouncing that right. I apologize. Meaning they all descend from a single common ancestor. So about 59 to 45 million years ago, early Sirenians were four-legged creatures who kind of waded in low water, and they kind of lived an amphibious lifestyle, perhaps growing more attached to water when competition for food and resources grew more competitive. It became harder to find the consistent and necessary resources on land. So they may have started staying in the water longer, and eventually the ones who were more adept in the water became the ones that were the only ones left, and so on, so on. About 35 million years ago, the modern dugongs and the Dugongidae family diverged from the main Sirenian, the main line which contains the three modern extant species of manatees. And then 16 to 13 million years ago, we find one of the earliest manatees that could be kind of misconstrued for a modern manatee, which was called the Potamosiran, which was just recently discovered less than 20 years ago in the early 2000s. I believe we know it now by some dental fragments and pieces of enamel. That I just told you about, and it's a chart of yearly manatee deaths. The yearly counts start in 2016 and onwards. From 1995 to 2016, as you can see on the key or on the x-axis, they were conducted every 3 years. I need to say that the lower numbers you see in the 90s and early 2000s may be underestimating, as the methods used in those studies and evaluations may not be as good or as pervasive as the ones used today. Um, as you can see, I have the years 2017, which was the year North American, or more specifically Florida, manatees were reclassified as vulnerable instead of endangered. And then just a few years later, you can see in 2021, the highest single year mortality since data has been recorded. Over 1,000 Florida manatees died that year, which was the highest on record at the time. This also sparked controversy over the validity of the decision to reclassify, and if maybe that is what's having the negative effects on the manatee's protection, or in a sense, causing more deaths. That is going to conclude my presentation. Thank you for watching, and thank you for teaching this super accelerated class over the summer. Um, I greatly appreciate it. I may be able to graduate a year early now. Um, but yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your summer, and I wish you the best. Thank you.